Hey guys, let's do another Knudson update. Here we are at the hydroponics tower and we've got some cool stuff happening here, so let's take a look, especially with our cucumbers and our lemon balm. All right, last time we noticed that there was a lot of flowering happening and we've got even more flowers now. One thing I do want to point out though, the flower that we looked at last time never did get fertilized, and as a result the fruit that it wanted to make is not growing. We're not getting a lot of pollinators over here. Bees are much more content to go to our garden where there are a lot more flowers than over here, and the plant will not invest resources into making a fruit if its seeds haven't been pollinated. If they haven't been fertilized, if the eggs haven't been fertilized, we're not going to get seeds. And so the plant isn't going to want to invest its resources in them. So one thing that I want to do here is help out our cucumber. We've got some female flowers here and over here, and there are a few more poking around here on our vine. So what I want to do is take some male pollen and put it on these female flowers so that we can start to get some cucumbers that we can then use maybe to make pickles. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take one of these male flowers here and I'm going to pluck it off. And then I'm going to peel away the petals just like we did before, and I'm going to apply some pollen onto these female flowers so that we can get some fertilization and fruit development. Alright, so I've got a male flower that I've peeled the petals away from, and I'm going to try and apply some of its pollen onto this female flower to encourage fruit development. Alright, I'm just going to go around and do this with these other cucumber female flowers to see if we can get some fruiting. Because unless they get pollinated, unless those eggs get fertilized, we're not going to get cucumbers. Now, that was a lot of work just to try and fertilize a couple of cucumbers. Imagine if I had a whole field of cucumbers, or an orchard of almond trees, and I needed to fertilize all of those flowers before I could harvest their fruit. I couldn't do it. I would need help. And what happens is that in the real world, farmers rely on bees, so much so that some farmers will even pay beekeepers to bring their bees to their fields when it's time for their flowers to be pollinated. Because you can't pollinate by hand. You've got to have help. So that's a big part of agriculture, is making sure that fruit gets pollinated. Bees do it better than just about anything else. Another thing I wanted to talk about here, our dill seems to be doing okay. And our lemon balm is doing especially well. Our peppermint is not doing great. It's doing okay. And we find that certain plants do better in hydroponics than others. And that's just a factor of the environment that we can create for them. But that's our hydroponics update. Very cool stuff. Hopefully we successfully fertilized some cucumber eggs and we'll get some cucumber fruit here in a little bit. Let's go out to the main garden now. All right, speaking of fruiting cucumbers, we've got a luffa patch here that is just exploding with fertilized fruit thanks to our bees. Let's take a look here. And if we look over here, some of the luffas we looked at last week, they have grown. They are big, they are maturing. And they're pretty watery right now. But as they grow and mature, they're going to start to dry out and they'll leave behind a really spongy, fibrous interior that houses the seeds. and that we can then use as a scrubber for all kinds of things, cosmetics and even in the kitchen. So here's our loofah patch successfully fruiting because of our bees. Now over here is a really cool bee, and I don't want to scare him too much. I'm going to see if I can follow him around. He's not a honeybee. He's what we call a carpenter bee. And he's big, and he's bumbly, and he's flying around here, and he's perfectly harmless. If we can find him here. Looks like he might have left. But there's more than one kind of bee. Looks like he flew away. That's too bad. I wanted to get a close-up on him. But carpenter bees visit our garden sometimes. And they're big, and they look scary, but they're not scary at all. Shouldn't be afraid of carpenter bees unless you really agitate them, but they're not going to come attack you. So let's take a look over here, though, at our loofah patch, which is full of honeybees. So we can see here, we've got honeybees all around our loofah patch, gobbling up nectar, carrying pollen around, and as you can see here, they have been successful. Our loofah has been growing nice big fruits. They look a lot like cucumbers or zucchinis, but we've got a ton of them now. Some of them are big, some of them are medium sized. All right, remember that pole bean that we had observed previously on our sunflower stalk that went all the way up to the top? Well, it couldn't find anywhere else to grow, and it's actually fallen down, and you can see it's this tangled mess here at the bottom of our sunflower stalk. It just didn't have anywhere else to grow, and so it kind of lost its footing, so to speak, on the sunflower stalk. Our basil tree, our basil bush, is doing outstanding. It's growing really well. But one thing I will note with some displeasure, I've got a papalo plant growing. We tried to grow these last year, and nobody liked them. Students tasted them and recoiled in horror at the taste of papalo. Papalo is commonly used in certain parts of Central America, particularly, and in Mexico. But you guys didn't like them, so I'm just going to pull this one up. I'm not going to grow something that you guys don't want to eat. It's very fragrant, very sulfury, though. Pole beans. Our purple pole beans on our cone have been growing. They're doing okay. They're not wrapping around the bean cone rods yet, but hopefully they will. And we've got our little experiment over here with our short branch that's growing as well. Next, let's take a look at our corn and our pumpkins. All right, corn's doing well. Our male cornflowers are all dried up. They've shared the pollen that they're going to share. And our corn ears are maturing. They're doing pretty well. Some of them didn't get fertilized well, and that's okay. That happens sometimes. But we've got some good production here from our corn stands, and we're looking forward to harvesting this corn pretty soon. Once the corn stalks start to dry up, then we'll know that the corn is probably mature and it's ready to harvest. Not quite there yet. We'll give it some time. Let's move on to our pumpkins next. Speaking of fertilization, here is the cornflower that we tried to fertilize last time, and hopefully it got fertilized well, but it's not looking great. If you don't completely fertilize the eggs, they're not going to grow, and that's not going to spark the kind of fruit development we want. So we hope that this develops, but it might not. We might have to find another female flower to cross-pollinate, and that's okay. I wouldn't want you to think that all fertilization is unsuccessful, however, because here we have one of our Blanco pumpkins. She got fertilized. The bees did a better job than I could have. And she's doing great. She's growing, she's developing, she's doing really well. We've got some other male flowers here. We've got a female that got pollinated. She got fertilized, and she's doing okay. She's not quite as big as the other one, but she's doing all right. I think that's it for our fertilized. Oh, here we've got one. And we might actually try this in reverse. We've got a nice female Blanco. Let's see if we can fertilize her with some male Atlantic Giant. So let's go over here. We'll grab a nice male Atlantic Giant full of pollen. We'll just pick him off. Take him over to our female here and see if we can cross-pollinate her with a male Atlantic Giant. All right, the last thing here I want to talk about are two varieties of watermelon that we're growing. We've got our Sugar Baby watermelons. They're a solid colored watermelon. They develop this kind of yellowish spot when they're ripe. But then I've got some Dixie Lees that have been difficult to grow this year, but they have stripes. So what would happen if we took pollen from a solid watermelon and put it onto the female flowers of a striped watermelon? Well, we'll find out. We've got some seeds growing in this striped Dixie Lee watermelon that are a cross between the solid and the striped. So the question is, what's going to happen when the genes from this solid watermelon and the genes from this striped watermelon interact as a new watermelon plant is growing? And I do want to take a look at the endocarp, the flesh of the watermelons. Just to compare, we had some Desert King watermelons that have a yellow endocarp, but these two both have red. So let's take a look at the red flesh and compare and see if there's any difference in the tone of the red endocarp. All right, comparing the endocarp, the colors here, our Sugar Baby looks like it's more coral colored than our Dixie Lee. Another major difference that I can see is that while our Dixie Lees have these big black seeds, our Sugar Baby seeds are much smaller, and by comparison, we'll put it here, they're brown. So this is another trait that might interact, right? So interesting genetics experiments. One thing I will note is that the color in watermelons is produced by a substance called lycopene, which is a nutrient that is chemically related to vitamin A. And the amount of lycopene that a watermelon produces is, of course, based on its genes, because lycopene is a protein, and that's what genes do. They tell the body how to make protein. So we'll take these home, we'll save the seeds, we'll eat the watermelon flesh, and then we'll grow these cross seeds in the spring so that we can see what happens when striped and solid watermelons are crossed. All right, that is it for our Knudson garden update. We'll come back here next week and see what else is going on here. In the meanwhile, I've got some watermelon and some basil to eat at home. So stay safe, guys, wear a mask, and we'll see you later.